I fixed my Zoom recording issue. I'm so happy. It was that Zoom fills up a file on your computer, and if it's too much, they'll say, nope, we're not recording anything anymore. But all it'll say on Zoom is, you have to ask the host for permission. Like, hey, I'm the host. Anyway, so this is going to be a fabulous recording from the beginning as I'm just rambling about stuff. Okay, I'll start afresh. So I thank you, Abby, for coming here. Abby, our wonderful librarian, and we're going to talk about search terms today. And just briefly, I will say that Holly's dissertation, a good deal of the methodology comes from just how you search and identify a set of articles from the literature. And so really it's Abby's profession that has the greater expertise in that. The thing is, it's not just about finding a set of articles, it's about making it replicable so that anyone could theoretically find all of the published social science journal articles from 2001 to now on character identification and not celebrity identification and not video games. It's film, TV, and books. That's what Cohen said he was defining in his paper. So to be able to do all of that is a real challenge to be able to make the statement that any psychologist at their university, they can just perform that search and they will generate the same list of articles. And one of the things we've come upon is just what if you have these 2 articles on your computer that fit in there, but none of your searches are bringing them up. Well, you can't really just add them because you can't tell your reader, well, just have a couple of articles on your hard drive. That's how you're going to find them. Ask me, I've got it. It's got to be the whole methodology. So, Abby, do you mind taking questions as you're presenting?
No, not at all. That's usually easier with a small group. Tell me though, are we doing publishing or searching? I came with some publishing tips, I thought.
Oh,
But
that's
then it
right.
sounds okay.
I'm going
I
off
just
on
want to make
another
sure.
subject just
I was
because when I
like,
see you, I think
no. Yeah, that's how
Um,
I am 24/7.
Yes, you're right. So today, Abby is here to talk about how you locate a journal to publish your research in. And I gave a talk about this, but Abby has different strategies and different knowledge and skill sets. And I always learn so much, and I'm recording this so that when she does her presentation, then we can go back to it and use that information. So thank you for coming here, and I will stop talking about search terms and hand it over to you.
Thanks, Karen. Well, for search terms, contact me anytime. It's like I think in search terms. So that's a topic I do like to discuss, even though not what I will say today. And we are a small group, so feel free if you have questions or comments as I'm showing things, ask them whenever it's convenient for you, and I'll pause and things like that too. I'll turn on my screen share here. What I wanted to do, I thought I'd show you just sort of a 2-part presentation I've done for folks like alumni and different panels before, which is some tools that are freely available that can be really just sort of user-friendly, handy ways to identify journals to publish in. And then also just a little bit of background on predatory publishers, what they are, sort of how to avoid them, because that's a problem that's just becoming really rampant these days. And I wanted to sort of show you what they look like and some strategies so that you don't feel worried when you go to publish that you're dealing with one of those. I have some slides for background. Mostly I'll hop out to the web and actually show you these different tools and some thoughts about how to use them. And like I said, feel free if you have questions, comments, anything like that. Don't hesitate to jump in there. So the first thing I want to show you, I really want to show you 2 sort of handy little tools to help you find places to publish. One, I have it listed here as text analyzers. They're starting to be called journal suggesters. Speaking of search terms, we can get into all this jargon. And then some other tools that sort of rank journals by their impact that can be a handy way to identify leads. So when I made this presentation, these tools are really new. They're a lot still in beta testing. So they were first coming out and they were called text analyzers. Now what's in fashion is to call them journal suggesters. I'm only sort of lingering on that in this context because when you go out to find them, usually if you Google journal suggester, that's the best way to pull a bunch of them up now. And I'll show you some examples, but essentially what they are, they really are like AI. So they have an algorithm and you can copy and paste some details about your article, like a title and abstract or a portion of the manuscript. They run through their algorithm and say, hey, here's some journals that we think would be a good match for this article that you want to publish. Most of the time, these tools are linked to a specific publisher. So the one thing I would say keep in mind is if you go use one of these, you're only seeing journals from that publisher. So you probably want to use a few different ones so you aren't, just stuck, under one umbrella. But I think they're handy because sometimes it's just, how can you ever know the names of all the journals out there that publish in different arenas? It's just a different way to sort of think about getting suggestions. So I thought I'd show you one. They're super straightforward and easy to use. I have a handout I can put in the chat that has the name of a few. More and more keep coming out from different publishers though. That's why I say, honestly, just doing a web search for something like Journal Suggester will pull a lot of these back up so that you can sort of take a look at them and see which ones you want to try. So I'm on, this is a little small here. So this is just an example. This is the one from Springer. I know just in terms of big publishers, Springer has one, Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, Wiley, a lot of big names have something similar. So in their case, they say, great, why don't you plug in the title of what you're working on and some of the text. I actually took the title and abstract of an article they published just to see if it would suggest the journal that it was published in. So here's a title. You can put in as much text as you want. I think the thought here is probably the more text, the better for it to get a sense of what the article's about, but I'm just going to plug in an abstract. Then up to you. Some of the tools will let you sort of granularly try to say, okay, this is my abstract, but I really feel like I want to publish in, the psychology sphere or social sciences. I usually don't do this at first just because I'm curious to see what it spits out, but obviously you have some choices. Then I just press the button saying, hey, suggest some journals for me. It looks like nothing's happening. The little algorithm is now doing its work behind the scenes. And now I get some suggestions. So this is the journal where I pulled the article, so that's probably a good sign that it was suggested. Just for context in terms of what you're looking at here, I don't know why the acceptance rate is not showing up right now. I think this is a temporary thing because it normally does, but they're giving you just a little preview. So here's journals that we think are a great match based on the words that you put into the search box, any additional information we have, if the journal has an impact factor, how long it usually takes to get a decision. A lot of this, if you've used that Cabell's directory of publishing, some of this is similar content you might see there. So from here, the platforms will vary a little bit, but generally if you make a selection, I can get a few more details, aim and scope, just sort of get all those details without having to jump out to 500 different websites to try to figure out what might be a good match. I want to point out something here to pin in your brain that we're going to come back to all the way at the end when we talk about predatory publishers. But in addition to seeing sort of aim and scope details, something else really handy to look at when you're finding somewhere to publish is where the journal's indexed. And that's just their way of saying sort of what subscription tools or resources make the content discoverable. So if, someone in a library has access to EBSCO or ProQuest databases, they'll be able to see this content. So it sort of gives you a sense of how visible your research will be if you publish in a given journal. And this, some of this will not always be recognizable, but some of it should at least sound familiar to you, like seeing EBSCO, ProQuest, PsycInfo. Those should at least be things where you say, okay, great. Those are common tools. I know our library has them. Most libraries probably have them. So if I publish here, a lot of folks should be able to see my research. So that's sort of what you can get by looking at this. And when we talk about predatory publishers, this is really handy to just sort of be familiar with, because when you look in their list of indexed by, it starts to look a little strange. And that's a good indication to you that maybe they don't have that broad visibility and access because they're not really a reputable publisher. So we'll come back to that in a bit, but just something to consider when you're looking around. And last, just so you don't have a heart attack, if you see publication charge on one of these sites, they're usually telling you the cost if you publish your article open access. So it's not saying, if you publish here, no matter what, you pay a fee, but they're usually saying if you, publish under a certain model, this is what you pay. And we're going to talk a bit about this more in a little bit, but just a few call outs on the page.
That's
And
really
that,
helpful,
yeah,
Abby. If I may jump in here,
please.
it's interesting because as soon as I saw like EBSCO and the typical ones, PsycInfo and stuff, I would say to myself, it's legitimate. But it's interesting on here that there are a bunch that I hadn't heard of, like Japanese Science and Technology Agency and Norwegian Register. Like if it had only said those two, I would have thought like, but they must be legitimate and they're just including these worldwide things. Otherwise it wouldn't be in ProQuest and EBSCO and Google Scholar and everything.
Yes, that's what I think, but that is an interesting point because you will see, and I'll show you some of these are going to pop up in like some of the predatory journals we see. And what's interesting is some are like WorldCat. It's a space where it just sort of, it's more of a directory. So if a journal has an ISSN number, it can be there, whether it's predatory or not, versus other things that do some quality control like EBSCO, ProQuest, PsycInfo. So yeah, it's sort of taking the whole list because it's right. If I only saw 2 or 3 that I didn't recognize like you, that would give me pause. So it's good to sort of take in the big list and see, okay, do I know some of these? Yeah.
Can I ask you, Google Scholar, I don't know how that works because it's outside of a library search engine. If they just said Google Scholar, would that be a sign that we don't know if it's legitimate or not?
Yeah, if I saw it independent of other sort of more common subscription tools, I would probably want to do at least some more investigation because I would think that's sort of like some of these other ones I'm familiar with where, yeah, if you're a journal, you can show up there, but that doesn't necessarily tell me something about quality or peer review. I just know that you could show up in a results list. So yeah, I would want to see some other ones in addition to Google Scholar for sure.
Right. Thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah. So these, handy in this case, they'll take you to the author submission page if you're ready. What I would recommend to, sort of use these to get some ideas. And then really, I think one of the best things you can do when you're narrowing your list down is once you think you've identified some, go to the journal site and actually just browse through some volume and issue, check through tables of contents because that is going to give you a sense of really where their publishing activity lies. You don't have to do that with every journal ever, but as I was narrowing my list down, I would sort of take that next step and say, okay, this one does look interesting. Can I see, can I visualize how my article is going to sort of fit into this landscape? Because that might tell you, is this the best spot for me? So I would do that. Once I felt pretty confident that I fit the aim and scope of the journal, okay, I'm going to check some tables of contents. And of course, you can get into the nitty gritty of all the submission guidelines after the fact. But as I was sort of doing my early due diligence, those are the kinds of things I would look at. So yeah, these are, these journal suggesters, pretty straightforward. They all function really similar to this. Obviously slightly different interfaces, but just one way to think about if I know some publisher names and not journal names, how I can take what I'm working on, even if you don't have a, a finished article and get some ideas. Any questions or comments there? I know they're fairly straightforward before I hop to the next tool.
I have a question. I know in some cases with these research teams, there's a partial manuscript that's written, but I don't have an abstract for it. Could you put a couple of paragraphs from the introduction and try that?
I think so. The way, from testing them, I understand is they're really, whatever the algorithm is, they're really, I think, heavily relying on sort of keywords. And I don't know how much context. So I would say if you had, a few paragraphs worth of content. And I've seen, I think it's Wiley's when I was testing it out, they actually wouldn't even let me press the suggest button until I had a certain amount of text in the box.
Right.
So I think they do just want a certain volume of text that probably captures good keywords that are going to describe the article.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Like maybe in the first couple of paragraphs of the intro, one normally puts, okay, this is a paper about identification and parasocial relationships or something. So you're naming these things that
Yes.
you would put in keywords. So as long as it has that, and less about listing your results, which you would do in the abstract, because you're still using the same terms because you're still naming your variables. So
Mhm,
yeah, I'm
mhm.
gonna play with that a while and see what I get.
Yeah. Feel free to let me know. These are so new that any data is interesting to me about if they are spitting out results that seem like good matches for you or not.
Right, you don't want to be like, what, the American Dental Association,
Yeah,
what?
exactly. Like, where did this come from? Exactly. Yeah, so I'll send you, actually, before I forget, let me just put in the chat. I've got a little sort of handout that just goes with what I'm showing you all that has some links to the things I'm showing you. So I'll put that in chat just so you have it. Again, this is not the full list. These are cropping up so frequently. I don't have the, this year's current list. So again, just remember, if you web search, you can pull up a bunch more of these too. Okay, so that's sort of the idea of the journal suggester. The other thing I wanted to suggest that might be useful is there are some websites that sort of rank journals, right? So this is them doing that more classic measure of impact where they have a really complicated calculation. Essentially what they're doing is looking at how many times on average an article is cited in that journal, but there's a lot more going on than that that we can or cannot get into. But these ranking tools, take it or leave it if you're interested in sort of where the journal ranks in the landscape of other journals. They also just function really nicely as directories of journals by subject, because rankings aren't, you can't compare them across subjects. So these tools have to let you get in there and get a list of, just journals that publish on communication or just journals that publish on social psychology. So regardless of anything else, it can just be a nice place to see a list of journals in that field to help you get an idea of some titles. Usually the journals you see in these rankings, they have some sort of impact factor. So it's likely they are not predatory if they've made it, into a ranking site. Granted,
Oh, that's really smart. I hadn't thought of that, Clarivate has all these many variables, like you say, that before they decide to give an impact factor, because it's like the popular media just got its first one last year. And
mhm,
so, yeah, it wouldn't be in there if it had passed all those hurdles. So that's a good thing to look at, because sometimes people will say, well, this has an impact factor of 0.8, is that okay? But
yes.
it's definitely, it's legitimate and people publish there. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And they've done some vetting to that regard. I'll muddy the waters a little. I think there is one fake ranking website, which really starts to we're going down the rabbit hole here, but I'm going to show you one that uses data from Scopus, which is a really common tool, but it's freely available. So I'm going to show you this one because I know it's using reliable data from a reputable source. And if you ever find a just random ranking website and you want to email it to me, we can sort of look at where they pull their data to make sure. But
That's
generally
so
it's,
evil.
yeah,
So they're starting their whole, like, their own little
it's
impact
yeah,
factor.
it's like its own little world, to stay insular. But generally speaking, we'll see where that goes. But the one I'll show you now, it's called SciMago, and it's from just a group of sort of research institutions, and they use data from Scopus. If you're not familiar, is just sort of a really big name in the field of sort of metrics and journal rankings and impact. So I like to show this one because I know we can trust where they're pulling the data from. So it's called SciMago. They do a just SciMago journal rank. If you're curious, when I was talking about, so this is their formula for ranking. So I tell you, it really goes wild. So you can find this information if you're interested. But suffice to say, they're looking at a number of metrics related to sort of how frequently articles are cited across time, and also where those citing articles themselves are published. But if you just wanted to use this to find some journals, you could go to their journal rankings. Again, these things aren't really comparable across fields. So to make the most use out of this, you want to choose a specific subject area and then a subcategory. So I'm going to choose social science, and then I'll choose communication. Some of the media psychology stuff lives both in psychology and communication. So I thought this would be a good example. So take or leave what's happening over here, but what this is showing you sort of over time how many citations are sort of, or how many folks are citing articles in these different publications. And we can get into that if you want. If you hover over the columns, they'll give you little definitions. But if you use this just in the bare bones way, these are journals that publish in the communication field. And right now they're listed by how this website ranks them. So this is sort of the highest ranked one, communication methods and measures, you know, and all of these sort of follow. So again, I like this because I'm getting a list of journals that publish in the field. I'm very confident these aren't predatory. You know, even if it's number 30 in the list, that doesn't mean it's not reputable. You know what I mean? It's just a journal that publishes in this field, and there is some level of citation activity. And in this tool, you know, if you click on an option, you can get just some sort of a little bit of bare bones data here. So this one's published by Sage. That is a reputable publisher. I'm sure we've all heard of them. I can sort of see how else it's categorized, just if that helps me think about my own, you know, research and where I think it would fit in the publishing landscape. I can link out to the homepage, which I'll show you in a second. And down below, I can see the aim and scope. So I don't have to, you know, immediately leave. I could read what the scope of this journal is, get some more information. Depending on your level of interest, if you want to go down the rabbit hole, if you scroll down, let me scroll quite a ways here, they'll actually give you data about how things in this journal are cited over time. So that would just depend on how interested you were in that. They'll say, you know, on average, it looks like most articles in this journal get cited and a few don't ever. Lots and lots of data there if you want it, but if not, you can get the scope, and then you can get that link to hop over to the journal site and learn more about it, you know, just as I was showing coming through the other, using the journal suggesters. So just a different way to think about, I think, getting a list of journals in a field, and finding some that are a good match. And if you want, again, you know, seeing them ranked is giving you some degree of information about impact or the visibility if you publish in that particular journal. I know there's a lot on this page. Does that generally make sense? Does that pull up any questions or comments?
I'll just add that those are all reputable journals that I know about. And yeah, going down the page, it's not like you're scraping the bottom of the barrel. You're getting tons of really
Yes.
great, because this is broadly across communication. So you're getting journalism stuff, you're getting lots of subfields. And
Yes.
just to say that I read somewhere, the average number of citations for any single article is much lower than you might think. Like it's below 10. It's like
It's
5.
very low. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So, even an article never getting cited, that's not at all. Like that's probably pretty typical.
I think so.
So you think, okay, I'm going to do this entire thing and publish this article, and then it's not saying 5 people read it.
Exactly.
Just keep in mind that there's different ways of looking at the reach of a piece of work, and so the journal is heavily interested in the citations, but citations come from other scientists, not only other scientists who publish, and publishing is difficult. So and who you're citing in your article, that you would, there's lots of great articles that I never cite because they're not something I need to cite as evidence in my own research. So yeah, I'm just saying, if you publish something and you think, oh, it's only had 5 citations, but that's normal, right? But that's why, like at Psychopopular Media, they also give me download data. And thanks to Abby, I also know all about altmetric. And those are 2 other ways of looking at it. So let's say it has 5 citations, or it may have more, but not like 100 or something. But then it has thousands of downloads. To me, that means a lot of college students are reading it and using it for their papers. They're actually citing it, but they're not citing it in a publication. And then with the altmetric, it generates a lot of press and things like that. There's more to it than that, but yeah, just knowing these statistics so you don't think oh, no one's reading that if it says 5 citations. No, no, no. No, that's fine. That's good.
Yeah, I totally agree. I would take this with a grain of salt as one of many, many factors. And to your point, a lot of these tools are only looking at other journals. So, we aren't seeing like dissertations, books, right? Social media, people getting on social media and commenting. So definitely one of a piece, but certainly not one to linger on. So I completely agree. I would definitely use this more getting lists of journals I could explore than sort of any other piece.
Yeah. It says Q1, that's probably there in the top quartile.
Exactly. So they chunk them into quartiles.
Yeah, so like New Media and Society, it's hard to get something in there. I think of it as a prestigious journal, and it's therefore in the top quartile there of journals.
Yeah, precisely. And you can you can go through and see. And sometimes, even looking at the citation counts, sometimes it feels negligible, quartile 1 and 2. So it is really just sort of a metric, but
Right.
I would, if I saw one, in quartile 2 or 3, that doesn't mean I would say, well, I can't, publish there.
Right.
I wouldn't use that as my reason to walk away for sure.
Yeah. And by the way, number 47, Poetics, you would think that would not be the title of a science journal, but it is. And in fact,
Yeah.
it is squarely in anyone working with me in the lab, that's squarely something. I've never submitted anything there, but I've always wanted to. And Melanie Green, who's on one of our teams, who's a top scholar in narrative psych, I know she's published some things in Poetics, and Keith Oatley and others. So that's actually I think of it as a great journal, and I totally intend to at some point submit something there. But the word poetics makes it think, I was having a whole conversation with someone about trying to convince them that literally APA style says do not use poetic language. You
Yeah.
cannot have alliteration in your paper. And that's not because we hate happiness. It's just we're trying to stick to the facts,
Right.
And so it's a science report. So unfortunately you can cite a poem,
Yeah.
but you can't really write one, within the paper.
Right. Yeah, and a good example, that's kind of why I like these directories too. I might, if I just saw poetics and searching, I might skip it. But knowing, okay, you consider it in the communication field, like, great, let me look more at it.
Right, right, or
Yeah.
convergence or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that's food for thought with the sort of ranking sites, journal suggesters. My plan now is to give you a little background on the predatory publishers and just thinking about those. Stop me if you have any questions. You might be familiar with them. If not, really what they're doing, when I say illegitimate, I just mean they're publishers that don't really have a quality control process. So they might purport to use peer review, but not really do it. They aren't taking steps to ensure that this is sort of expert content in the field. And they take advantage of the open access model so they can make money. And really why we try to watch out for them is because it can just sort of be a lot of stress and money for you in different ways. So if you published in one by mistake, and then you're applying for a job and they see you're published in a predatory journal, that could be harmful to your reputation. Since they don't index, like we were talking about, in visible places, you might publish the article, but then no one's ever going to see it because it's not really easily findable. And there's just like a really, I know, long and complicated process if you publish here to try to sort of retract it if you wanted to actually publish that article elsewhere. So all good reasons to pay attention and try to avoid them. So just a little more context, and then I'll sort of give you some tips to avoid them. But most of you are probably familiar with open access publishing, but this is what they're taking advantage of, where we all say, great, I publish open access, then lots of people can find my work as long as they have an internet connection. And sort of traditional credible publishers, as you saw in the Springer sample, they charge you to publish open access because they think they're going to lose money. So they'll say, yeah, we'll make it available to everyone if you give us $3,000. And predatory publishers, that's what they're taking advantage of. They're saying, oh, well, if you just give us $900 instead of $3,000, we'll publish it open access for you too. Isn't that, great of us to do for you? So they sort of are preying on the fact that you want to publish open access, and they want to make it really easy and less expensive for you to do that. So that's sort of how they try to get their hooks in you. things, sorry if this is small too, I can send you the slides. There's just a lot of things to look out for when you're looking at one. I'm going to show you, Karen, you actually gave me an email to use for this presentation that I have, but one real big red flag is if you receive an email solicitation, sort of inviting you to publish. If you think about a lot of journals, they receive enough submissions that they don't need to ask you for a submission. So that is one thing just to be cautious of if you, they really like to email. Also, you know, there's just things you can see like awkward language in the emails. If you're looking at their website and trying to track down who's on their editorial board, it might be hard to find details about them, figure out if they're real people in the field. Again, like we talked about, seeing where they index their content. So usually if I'm wondering if I've spotted a predatory publisher, you know, I'm sort of going through this checklist and I'm doing some due diligence out in different spots on the web to try to spot them, which I'll show you. So let me show you just a screenshot of this email that Karen let me borrow. This is the email she got. There's a lot to look at. The couple things I wanted to point out, one up at the top, the name of the journal is Social Sciences. And very often you find that these predatory journals, they like to use really general names for the journals. And that's because there are some journals already with general names, so it can get a little tricky. Like, you know, they might have the International Journal of Social Sciences. That sounds good, you know, but actually it's not really a credible journal. So you'll often see a general name, which might make you wonder. This one's published by Science Publishing Group. I pointed this out because I'm familiar with them. So right off the bat, I was like, uh-oh. And then I just highlighted some spots where I thought, this feels like what I would mean by sort of awkward language. It would feel odd for me to receive this from a publisher. So of course, this would set off all my bells. And I would want to just determine if this was anyone I wanted to deal with. What I did, I already knew Science Publishing Group was not legit, but if I didn't, some things I do are, one, there is a directory of open access journals called DOAJ, and this directory, it's great because they vet anyone who wants to be a member. So if the journal is in here, it should not be predatory. They actually make sure that you have a peer review process. They sort of do all this due diligence for open access journals. You know, so I came here and I said, okay, let's just double check, you know, is Social Sciences in here? Let me scroll down. There is a journal called Social Sciences, but when I went to their website, it was a completely different publisher, completely different journal. So that for me, I said, you know, okay, strike one. They're not in the directory. There is a journal called Social Sciences in the directory and it's from a different publisher. That probably, you know, doesn't bode well for them. I also went to the journal's website. Let me grab it really quickly, just so you can see sort of how they list their indexing and things like that. So when I went to this journal site, on the face, you know, it's going to look fairly legitimate. This looks like it could be a journal website, but I went to their about page and just some of the things I was looking out for. So indexing, this is where we talked about sort of seeing where things are findable. I'm really unfamiliar with all but about two of the things I see in this list, which are WorldCat and Crossref. And those are both websites that, like we were talking about earlier, don't do quality control. They're just listings of journals. So for me, when I looked here, I said, okay, you know, I'm not seeing, if someone came to Fielding's library, that they would see any content in this journal. That's one way to think about it. You know, how would I discover things here? That raises a red flag for me. And I also just noticed, you know, they're talking about their charges, which is not necessarily uncommon, but it made me uncomfortable really how easy they try to make it. You know, here's PayPal here, you know, this starts to look to me like an advertisement to get my money as opposed to just explaining necessarily their fees and their process. So those are just, you know, the kinds of things I would try to keep an eye out for. I, of course, also did some web searches, and it was really easy for me to find other people's stories about dealing with them and how they weren't legitimate. So relying on sort of other information out there or colleagues is a great strategy. I have in the handout I put in the chat, there's a really great blog post where someone got solicited by this and another publisher, and she submitted 2 papers that are actually just gibberish. One of them is this one written by some Simpsons characters, and it makes absolutely no sense if you look through it, and it was accepted, right? So this is a really good example. The other one has a lot of profanity, so I did not pull it up, but if you look at the examples, it's a really interesting study of why you don't want to be accepted in one because of the lack of quality control. So there are some things, you know, those are sort of just as I'm sleuthing things I would do. Check that larger directory, look at the journal's website, see if I can find other information online. You can usually sort of piece together if it's legitimate or not. And if you can't, of course, you can reach out. I'm glad to help you look around. And there are some great resources online. So there's a website called Think, Check, Submit. What it does is it just sort of reminds you of a lot of the steps I talked about, so that before you just gung-ho, you know, decide I'm going to publish here, just stopping and saying, did I determine, you know, if they're credible? Did I determine X, Y, and Z? We've got a library guide with lots of examples. There's a website, a group called the Committee on Publication Ethics. They have good content, and also journals will often post in their about information that they're a member of COPE. So that's another sort of great sign to say, okay, they're not predatory if they're a member of COPE. And then, you know, giving yourself a chance to do some sleuthing and making sure that you really look around to get information if it's a journal you're really unfamiliar with. Questions, comments there on sort of the predatory side?
I have a question about academia.
Oh, yeah.
They send me articles and I appreciate that, but then they also are asking me for Upgrade Pro memberships, and I just don't understand.
This is academia.edu.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
exactly. Right.
Yes, so that site and ResearchGate's another big one like that. That's interesting. Those are sort of, I think the best way I could describe them are like academic social networking sites. So you as a researcher can have a profile and list your affiliation. And a lot of times what they'll do is, depending on who the copyright owner is, you can upload copies of your articles if you're allowed to. There's a lot of sort of gray area there, but folks will put, you know, their own articles, research projects and things up on the site to share research with others. So I think they have sort of premium membership you can pay for to sort of have more access, at least to some of the full text content. The thing is, you know, they aren't doing any quality control because the researcher is the one going there and making the profile and posting the content. So if I find an article on academia.edu or ResearchGate, it's left to me to sort of do the due diligence to make sure that it's, you know, an actual publication in a peer-reviewed journal or whatever it is, because you can also just post, you know, I could just post a paper I did from a project where maybe no one reviewed it, but I'm just saying, here's the project I did. So it largely, it's people doing legitimate research and wanting to share with each other and connect and follow each other. It's in that spirit. But in terms of knowing what people are posting and whether they're allowed to post it, that is the gray area where you might have to do some follow-up. I don't know what they want you to pay for specifically, but I'm guessing it's access to like premium features related to sort of following or accessing. Yeah.
I could comment on that. So
yeah.
those two that Abby mentioned, academia.edu and researchgate.net, they're both completely legitimate, and they are basically like social media for researchers. And it's kind of more like LinkedIn than like Facebook, because it is about your profession rather than just, I ate a blueberry bagel today, or, you know, something like that. Although I guess you could put that up there. But there's some stuff in there that's kind of interesting where they have a database or something inside there. Because, for instance, they have this thing called Spotlight, and you can spotlight any of your research, but it has to be published in the last 2 years. And when you try to put it up there, they will check it and they'll tell you if it's legit. So they somehow look up the DOI, you know, so they have some kind of internal thing. But you're right, like I suppose I could write anything and put it up there as a manuscript. Now, when you like, I have a lot of my journal articles up there, and before you post it, you have to write in the DOI and the journal name and all this stuff. And then again, there's some kind of search engine back there, because they'll identify your co-authors and look for them on academia.edu or wherever. And then like for everyone's page, they do a computer generated who are your common co-authors. So there's little heads of people I've published with up there. And I'm not putting that in. I'm not saying I love publishing with Mindy. They're just like, okay, I'm going to grab your mentor. I'm going to grab, different people you've published with and just stick that on your page. So it's weird how they have some legitimate like ability to search and get the details from that you'd only have if it were published like a DOI or the journal name or the year or things like that. And they'll stop you from putting something up there if it doesn't meet some of their criteria sometimes, but you have, in fact, I was thinking about maybe there's a thing where put my lab on here. So I could put all of you guys and you could all have, because you have to have .edu addresses to get on there. So that is a quality control, but Abby's perfectly right that you could be writing that article she just showed or something and just like stick that up there if you wanted to, but that would be fun. But yet somehow it pulls up your H index, I don't know, it's doing all kinds of stuff in the background. And the people who are on there, I mean, they are actually researchers, but they could be students, undergrads, grad students, what have you. But to your question, Holly, about what are they wanting, I could show you mine. I don't know if I've paid for it right now or not, but I have paid for the extra stuff. It tells you lots of details about who's searching for you, who's reading your work, who's citing your work. And inside there, they'll like give you the little flag of the country they're from, their name. And when they download an article of yours from that website, they ask the person if they want to leave a reason. So I get these, I think they're cute notes from students just saying like, I'm writing a paper on whatever, and I just downloaded your article. And I like that. So I think it's worth the 99 bucks a year or whatever. But yeah, there's just anytime people search for you, anytime people download your stuff. So it is like social media data. And never in my life before did I know that on a given day, like someone in Israel has now, read my research or whatever. And I find it so great. Back in the day when we just had the books and we didn't have all the media and stuff, you don't know who's reading your stuff or how they're getting it, or so it's kind of amazing to me. I'm kind of glad those things exist.
Yeah, that's very insightful. So it sounds like some of that, yeah, you're paying for those added analytic features, which could
Right.
be really cool.
What do you really want to know about who's and they'll send you notes like they'll send me, I actually use these in my promotion packet. They send you notes and they say you are the most downloaded author from your university. Now that means the most downloaded author of people who are on ResearchGate.
Right.
But still it's cool to get those. They give you a little, it is like, they give you like a little badge. You are this month's most downloaded. It's like you've won your video game round or something.
Right. That's cool. That's insightful. I haven't used it enough to know some of those features, so it's helpful. Yeah, and I perceive it largely legitimate too. So I think it would be maybe if someone mistakenly published somewhere predatory and listed it there, you could fall into that trap. But by and large, it's people, I think, really wanting to network and share. Yeah. Research.
I really appreciate your use of the word quality control, because I've tried to explain why you'd want to publish in a peer-reviewed journal rather than somewhere else. It really is quality control. And people will ask me sometimes, should I self-publish? And there's a longer answer to this, but in terms of your research, I would not self-publish your research because it has to be peer-reviewed for people to take it legitimately. And there are, for fiction, there'd be a whole other conversation, but for your research, what's stopping me from starting my own website and publishing my research on that? It's not indexed, so that means my colleagues couldn't find it. They're not just going to go to everyone's website and download the research. And it doesn't have quality control from peer review blocking it from getting published if they think it's flawed seriously, and also from so is it high quality? And then when you go through the peer review process at a publisher, you also go through copywriting, just like you will with your dissertation. So just grammar and stuff in APA style. There's a professional team helping make sure it is all APA style. Because I make mistakes in APA style, and someone else is there to catch it. So by the time it gets published, little typos and little APA style errors and stuff are taken out.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. So if you'll indulge me in one more slide related to publishing, but not predatory publishers, since you're all interested in publishing, I just wanted to say, in the library world, it's getting more and more common for publishers we subscribe with to give us waivers so that you can publish open access without paying those $3,000, which is amazing. So right now we just have one deal like this through Wiley, but they have about 1,400 journals that qualify. So I have a list of journals. I don't just, post it everywhere, but if you find yourself getting ready to publish or seeing something in Wiley you're interested in, it just is getting more and more common, it's particularly with library subscription agreements, to sort of get this into the deal, because those subscriptions are so expensive and we want sort of some benefit from paying top dollar. So we do participate in one with Wiley. I think others are going to be coming along soon. So it's a nice way to publish open access, to know it's somewhere credible, and to not be out, what is to me an astronomical fee to make your research widely available. So we're at the start of these agreements, but if you ever have questions about that or want the list of journals, or want to know more about that process, I have all those sort of nitty-gritty details I can share with you too. So, and as we get more agreements, I will obviously talk those up, but it's early days, but they are coming, I think, more and more as the years go by. So
Oh, that's so great. So just to make sure I understand, within university library systems, then all of those articles are open access, that you don't even have to have a subscription, or how exactly does that work?
so what they're doing, so since we pay a large sum to let everybody have access to Wiley, we're paying their subscription fee. But what they'll do is they'll say, okay, well, if any student or faculty at Fielding wants to publish an article in a Wiley journal and make it open access so that people elsewhere, as long as they have an internet connection, want to read it, we'll waive that fee. So normally, they'd say, okay, Karen, you can publish open access for $2,900, but since you're at Fielding and Fielding subscribes to Wiley, we'll let you do it for free. So
And that's so
it's
great.
letting,
So it will actually be true open access, open to the world. You don't have
yes,
to pay the fee, because Fielding is paying a fee to them. So that's like you were
exactly.
explaining. I didn't realize that they're saying basically, like, let's say if everyone wanted open access, then no one would buy our journal. So we're charging you.
Yes. Yeah. So since Fielding is giving us money for people within Fielding to read all our journals, we'll give you some waivers to make your research more widely available. Yeah.
That's so great. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very sort of new in the landscape, but one way that sort of libraries are trying to get back some power with how expensive subscriptions can be. So if it's of interest, now or in the future, I have the list and details, and yeah, definitely something and it makes your work much more visible because it's not behind a paywall, where a student might not be able to afford it. So.
And just the very briefest version, I think that these fees are a social justice issue, because if you have more money, you can easily just give them $3,000. And that means your research is more accessible, more citable. The rich get richer. So it's maddening. It's not like researchers are just, richy rich over here. We don't have the $3,000 to drop on every, people. My family asks me all the time, do they pay you when they publish an article? And I laugh ruefully. They don't. Now they want $3,000 from me.
Yeah, it's absolutely maddening. I completely agree. It's a social justice issue. And then it's like, okay, this is sort of one model which is flawed, but it says, well, at least if you're associated with a library that, has the funds to access our content, yours can be more broadly available. So not perfect, but definitely going that way. So I'm trying to start to get the word out. So if anyone's interested, this is a good option for now in the future. Okay, well, that is, all I planned. I know there's just a little time left. If you have questions or comments, feel free.
I'll just say thank you. This is super helpful, and I don't have specific questions yet because it was a lot of new information. But
yes.
very helpful.
Awesome. No, and that's great. And if you have questions later too, you know where to find us.
Yeah, thank you so much. And especially for that detailed, I've been wondering about the whole ResearchGate and academia, like that whole situation. They've been contacting me since I've gotten into fielding. So I appreciate that as well.
Yeah, I learned a lot about that too. So thank you, Karen.
My
Yeah.
pleasure. Yeah, if you look on there, you see lots of legitimate researchers that you know, and just so you know,
Yeah.
whenever you publish with someone or do a presentation, which is, goes on your CV, they'll ask you, they'll say, like, if I put up there, Karen and Holly did a presentation, it'll say, invite your colleague, Holly. And, because they're wanting to get them on as well. That's their, I mean, it's a legitimate business and I'm glad they do it. I enjoy it. And I think it's a whole new way of connecting with my colleagues or with undergrad students wanting to download articles. I just look on there and they write you all the time. One of the hilarious things that happens to me is they'll write me all the time. I'll get this like inbox, so-and-so from so-and-so country wants a copy of blank, and it'll always be a book that I've published. Like, I can't, I can't just give you, I mean, I'm sure somebody's like putting it up there for free right now as we speak, but Oxford owns that or whatever. I can't send you a copy of the thing.
I don't think I realized that some of these were like direct contacts with authors and stuff,
Oh yeah, definitely. You can message them at so yeah, I have this inbox full of requests for copies because I put my articles on there, and Abby mentioned this. So the psychopopular media rule is you can put, I think we used to call them preprints or the manuscript version of your article. So if I write the Word doc of my article and it's accepted at a journal, I can say, okay, it's accepted at Psychopopular Media, and I can publish it, just put it up, share it on academia.edu. The publisher doesn't want you to put the published version, although I do have a bunch of my, I probably should be better and not do that, but I don't do it for PPM since that would be really bad behavior on my part. So I can put that for the rest of my life. You have the Word doc in your computer forever. I have the Word docs of my complete books. I have the Word docs of any journal article. So you put that up there and they're fine with it because it looks much different when they formatted it and they put it up there for publication version. They have all the specific professional formatting on there. So it's different. So people still do want the published looking version, just probably because the manuscript looks like anyone could have and put that up there. So you can do that. You can share your publications like that. And like I say, they don't let you on there unless you have a .edu address. So, that's just telling them that you are legitimately associated with a university. And so just not anyone, not that I don't know why people not at a university would want to get on there, but I mean, some people would. Like if you graduate, let's say you get a clinical PhD and then you're in private practice and you're not associated with the university, I don't know, maybe they let you do it if you're in a clinical practice. I don't know what the details are, but usually it's for researchers. It's, so they might be associated with the university no matter what. I want to share experience that maybe like 2017 or so, I was the first author of a journal article published by Pediatrics, which is a journal of the American Medical Association. And I'm getting ready to do another one of those on, right now I'm writing it with a group about parasocial relationships in children. And the thing is, ever since I was the first author on that pediatrics article, I am inundated by predatory emails, but they always have the word pediatrics in them. They're always like, and they'll cite the name of the article, which was about, it was about portrayals of race, gender, et cetera, in media for children. So it'll say like, do you have an article on pediatrics that you want to submit to us? And I'll always know, oh, they went into the journal, the Journal of the American Medical Association authors, and they're just spamming us with all these predatory things. So I get them like every day. And thankfully, it's a word that is not associated with the rest of my work. If it says pediatrics, then I'm like, okay, that's where that's coming from. But some of them are quite hilarious. Some of the language, like Abby was saying, the broken English, and sometimes they're very complimentary, like, oh, master of research, can you send us your latest? We will publish it in 12 days. I'm like, that'd be good. Sometimes you get weird ones like the Journal of Lung Capacity or something. Why? Like, okay, that would mean I'd have to write something on lung capacity. I don't know. It's a wild world out there. In a way, it did used to be simpler, you know, and now it's just there. It is predatory. It's like the picture of the shark. It's preying on academics who, you know, if you're at a research one institution, you have to publish something to keep your job. It's worth your livelihood, you know. And so, but you can't do it because, like Abby said, it is a mark, you know, on your reputation. So it would be pretty easy to accidentally do it because legitimate journals are asking you for the same type of money. And some of them are good at looking really cool. Like Abby said, they use the word like social sciences or something. It seems legitimate. And some of them are really like those emails you get from the prince from Africa or whatever. Like, I need you to send $1,200. What is that? The Nigerian prince who's always emailing you. Some of them look like that. They're in broken English and you're like, no, okay, that's, but some of them look legitimate. And I will mention, sometimes the publisher of a journal will say, we're going to send out an invitation to submit your work. And it's more likely to be formatted in a fancy way, like viewable on the internet, where it says, I got one not long ago from, what is it? Social networking and technology or something, a journal that I know about. And it's just saying, we're going to remind people that we are here and that you can submit to us. Like Abby said, most journals get way more submissions than they could ever publish, but sometimes every once in a while they'll the publisher themselves will send out a legitimate thing, and it won't have any of this weird language, and it won't be black and white. It'll be colorful. It'll have like the journal's logo on it. You know, you will just be able to tell, and it's not to you personally or citing things that you have done, but it's just, we're reminding you this journal exists and send us your stuff. Or it's a special issue thing where, hey, this journal is doing a special issue on political media effects or something. Call for papers, that we're just sending that out to you. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I have recorded it and I'll upload it to the YouTube channel, and Tim is streaming that from the main fielding thing. So all fellow geeks can can access that anytime. And so I really appreciate it. I'll go back to it and look. And Holly and I will definitely be hitting you up here at some point to try to do that difficult task of trying to identify all articles that have a word in them that is an everyday word. It's not easy.
We can brainstorm about that one. That's a good challenge. And thanks for having me. And if you all have questions later on, you know, Lulu and I are around and happy to help too.
We really appreciate it. We will utilize you guys' services for sure.
Awesome.
Have a great Friday, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.